shortcomings. Ameen ya Rabbal Alameen. As we were talking about this, staying away from major sins, especially those that are so harmful in the life of an individual and believer that it destroys a lot of his good deeds. We talked about shirk, after that staying away from magic, then we talked about killing an innocent life. And the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ continues. The next in line is akilur riba, the person who is involved in usury, interest. Now this is something that is very, very aggressively mentioned in the teachings of Islam, that a person who is involved in such a transaction, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He takes away the barakah from his life, and Allah Azza wa Jal puts him into difficulty. As Allah mentions, يَمْحَقُ اللَّهُ الرِّبَى وَيُرْبِي الصَّدَقَاتِ. Allah Azza wa Jal nourishes the charity and He demolishes the usury interest. Now, one is the physical aspects of it. By the looks of an individual, by taking usury, it is something that is a source of increasing your wealth. If a person gives money to someone, or he sells a merchandise to an individual, and then he expects for him to give him more than what is worth, then of course that extra amount in certain formalities or in certain terminologies of Sharia becomes usury and interest, especially when the transaction is money with money, or a transaction with the same amount of things, same type of things. And then what happens? In reality, you're getting more. But Allah Azza wa Jal says, يَمْحَقْ. Allah Azza wa Jal, He destroys, demolishes. And when you give charity, in reality, the money is decreasing on your end. But Allah Azza wa Jal says, وَيُرْبِ الصَّدَقَاتِ. Allah increases and He flourishes the benefit of charity. So, not only physical amount of wealth that is being involved or talked about, but also the spiritual aspects of it. In reality, charity is something that Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, تُدْفِعُ الْبَلَى. It takes away difficulty from the lives of individuals. And interest is something that brings difficulty in the life of individuals. If a person, his money is halal, by indulging in interest, even that halal, he makes it haram in such a way that the harms of it comes into his life. So we have to make sure that we stay away from this action. Now, of course, there is a very broad chapter to this, and all the involvement of what type of interest is haram and what type of is not, or how does it work, what are the transactions. These are all the details in the books of fiqh. But the concept of it is that this is something that any given portion of a person should stay away, and it's considered to be forbidden in Islam. There are two types of individuals who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala declares war against them. The first is that type of individual who harms a saint or a person of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Person doesn't harm anybody, he minds his own business. But you intentionally, just to show that you're more powerful, you go and harm him, or you go on his way, or you go try to give him difficulty. And especially those people who are, Allah Azza wa Jal has blessed them with ilm, Allah Azza wa Jal has blessed them with amal, and they are doing the work of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Anybody that involves in harming them, Allah Azza wa Jal says, I declare war against these people. No matter how smart you are, you cannot beat Allah Azza wa Jal. No matter how intelligent you are, you cannot stand up even for a small, fracture of a second in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is why, and you don't know who that person is. You don't know each individual, what type of connection this person has with Allah Azza wa Jal. That you go and you harm him, and then Allah comes in his way, Allah Azza wa Jal comes against you, and Allah destroys. And that's what has been seen in the past. Those people who stood up against the saints, right? Like from the time of the Sahaba, moving onwards, the Tabi'un, and then the great Imams, right? The person who stood up against Imam Ahmed ibn Hanbal rahmatullah alayhi during the time of the Khalqul Quran situation. All of them died a very bad death. And their life was very miserable upon them. So this is the first type of individual. The second type of individual Allah Azza wa Jal mentions and He declares war against is that person who gets involved in interest. Allah Azza wa Jal says, فَأْذَنُوا بِحَرْبٍ مِّنَ اللَّهِ وَرَسُولِهِ. Give them the announcement that they are in war with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we have to be very careful, especially the time and era that we live in, that the entire world is so gripped with this interest situation that one way or the other, directly or indirectly, somehow a person gets involved in it. So we should first ask Allah for protection, and we ask Allah to protect us from this sin. Ameen Ya Rabbal Alameen. Sometimes the sins become so obvious and so vast that it becomes very difficult for a person to stay away. And this is what the Prophet ﷺ has said about riba, that there will be a time where a person still intentionally, he doesn't want to be part of it, but somehow he'll become part of it. So it will become so common in societies. We ask Allah to protect us all. Ameen Ya Rabbal Alameen. Jazakum Allahu khairan. Subhanallah wa bihamdihi. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik. Wa nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk.